The morning sun rose over Valar Prime, painting the sky in shades of purple and gold. Coordinator Zephyra stood at the window of the council building, watching her people begin their day. The Velari moved through the streets below, their graceful forms flowing like water. They carried art supplies to the studios. They gathered in parks to discuss philosophy. They lived in peace, as they had for thousands of years. But Zephyra could not enjoy the beautiful morning. Her hands shook as she held the data pad. The reports were clear. The pirates would come again soon. They always did. The Draviks had first arrived 3 months ago. Their ships had dropped from the sky like dark birds of prey. The Velari had no weapons to fight them. They had no soldiers to defend their cities. They had nothing but words, and the pirates did not listen to words. The Draviks took what they wanted: food, technology. Sometimes they took people. Then they vanished into space, laughing at the helpless Velari. Zephyra had called the Galactic Council immediately after the first raid. She had begged for help. The Council had sent sympathies. They had sent official complaints to file. They had sent investigators who asked many questions but did nothing. The raids continued. Each time, the pirates grew bolder. Each time, they took more. Last week, they had taken children. Zephyra had spent 3 days in emergency meetings with the Council. The representatives had argued about laws and procedures. They had debated whether military action was appropriate. They had formed committees to study the problem. Meanwhile, Velari children sat in pirate cells crying for their parents. That was when Zephyra made her decision. She would break protocol. She would send an open distress signal to anyone who would listen. The Council would be angry, but she did not care anymore. Her people needed help now, not in 6 months when the committees finished their studies. She activated the planetary transmitter and spoke into the recorder. Her voice was steady, though her heart raced. She explained the situation. She begged for aid. She sent the message to every known species in the galaxy. Then she waited. The response came faster than she expected. But it did not come from the Council. It came from Earth. Admiral Kyle Bennett sat in his office on the orbital station above Earth, reading the distress call for the 3rd time. The Velari situation was clear. Pirates were attacking a defenseless world. The Council was doing nothing. Someone needed to act. Bennett was a tall man with gray hair and sharp eyes. He had spent 30 years in the Earth Defense Fleet. He had fought in the Mars Rebellion. He had commanded ships through asteroid fields and solar storms. He had seen war up close, and he knew its cost. But he also knew that sometimes war was the only answer. He pressed the button on his desk. His senior officers appeared on the screen. Captain Lisa Martinez commanded the EDS Warhammer, the fleet's most powerful battlecruiser. Commander Jake Harris ran tactical operations. Lieutenant Amy Chen led the fighter squadrons. Dr. Nathan Cross handled science and diplomatic relations. They were the best team Bennett had ever worked with. Bennett showed them the distress call. They listened in silence. When it finished, Martinez spoke first. Her voice was hard. She hated pirates. Her brother had died in a pirate raid years ago. She wanted blood. Harris pulled up star charts and tactical data. He analyzed the situation like a chess game. The Velari system was 3 weeks away at maximum speed. The pirates operated from somewhere in the nearby asteroid fields. Standard. Council procedure would take months to organize a response. By then, the Velari would have nothing left to save. Chen wanted to launch immediately. She was young and fierce, and she believed that humans should help those who could not help themselves. Cross urged caution. He reminded them that Earth was still new to galactic politics. Acting without Council approval could make enemies. Bennett listened to them all. Then he made his decision. They would go. They would take a full battle group. They would solve the Velari's pirate problem permanently. If the Council did not like it, they could file a complaint. Within 48 hours, the first expeditionary group was ready to depart. 12 battlecruisers, 30 destroyers, 6 carriers loaded with 300 fighters, 5,000 Marines in dropships. It was enough firepower to conquer a small nation back on Earth. Bennett hoped it would be enough to convince pirates to find a new profession. The fleet jumped to hyperspace, leaving Earth behind. The journey would take 3 weeks. Bennett used the time to study everything known about the Dravix pirates. There was not much information. They were a reptilian species, large and strong. They preferred ambush tactics. They had never faced serious military opposition. That would change soon. The human fleet dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the Valari system. Immediately, every sensor in the system detected them. The Valari watched in shock as human warships appeared. The ships were massive. They bristled with weapons. They moved in perfect formation, like a school of predatory fish. Zephyra received the notification in her office. She ran to the observation deck, her heart pounding. Through the telescope, she could see them. Dozens of ships, all of them built for war. This was not what she expected. She had hoped for peacekeepers. She had hoped for negotiators. Instead, she got an invasion fleet. The humans sent a message. Admiral Bennett's face appeared on every screen in the city. He was calm and professional. He introduced himself. He explained that Earth had received the distress call. He said that humanity would help end the pirate threat. He asked permission to speak with the Valari leadership. Zephyra granted permission immediately. What choice did she have? She gathered her council and waited. An hour later, a human shuttle landed outside the council building. Marines in armor stood guard as Admiral Bennett emerged. He was followed by Dr. Cross and several officers. Zephyra met them at the entrance. She was shocked by how tall humans were. Bennett towered over her. His handshake was firm but careful, as if he was afraid he might hurt her. She led them to the council chamber, where her advisors waited nervously. Another ship had arrived as well, a Galactic Council vessel. Ambassador Thexan of the Kryn Empire had come to observe. He was not happy. The council had not authorized military action. Humanity was acting outside proper channels. He made his displeasure clear. The meeting began tensely. Zephyra thanked Bennett for responding to the distress call. But she had to ask the obvious question. Why did humans bring warships? Why not diplomats? Bennett's answer was simple. Pirates did not respond to diplomacy. They understood only force. Humanity had come to provide that force. The Valari would be safe. The pirates would be stopped. That was a promise. Ambassador Thexan interrupted. He reminded everyone that the Galactic Council had procedures for situations like this. Military action required approval. Multiple species needed to vote. Investigations had to be completed. Bennett's fleet was in violation of at least a dozen regulations. Dr. Cross tried to smooth things over. He explained that humans came from a dangerous world. They had evolved fighting for survival. Their culture valued action over endless discussion. This was not aggression. This was how humans helped their friends. Zephyra felt torn. She found human methods frightening. The weapons on those ships could destroy cities. The Marines carried guns that could kill dozens in seconds. This was violence on a scale her people had never imagined. But she also remembered the children in pirate cells. The council had talked for 3 months. The humans had arrived in 3 weeks. Commander Harris presented his intelligence report. His team had analyzed pirate activity patterns. They knew when the next raid would occur. They knew the pirates' likely escape routes. They had a plan to intercept and destroy the pirate fleet. It would be quick and decisive. No long siege, no prolonged conflict, just one battle, and the threat would end. Thexan protested again. This was too aggressive. The proper response was to locate the pirate base and file charges. The council would send peacekeepers to arrest them. There would be trials. Everything would be done legally and properly. Bennett's expression did not change, but his voice became colder. How long would that take? How many more Valari would die while the council prepared its paperwork? How many? More children would be stolen while investigators asked questions. The room fell silent. Everyone knew the answer. The council's process would take months, maybe years. The pirates would continue their raids. More innocents would suffer. Zephyra made her decision. She gave humanity permission to operate in Valari space. Whatever they needed to do, they could do it. She would accept responsibility for breaking council protocols. Her people's safety mattered more than regulations. Thexan warned that there would be consequences. The council would not forget this. Humanity was setting a dangerous precedent. Other species might follow their example. The carefully maintained peace could collapse. Bennett stood to leave. He thanked Zephyra for her trust. He promised that Valar Prime would be safe. Then he turned to Thexun. His words were measured but firm. Earth did not come to the stars to watch innocents suffer while bureaucrats debated. If the council could not protect its members, someone else would. Humanity was volunteering for that job. Back on the Warhammer, Captain Martinez prepared her ship for combat. The crew moved with practiced efficiency. Weapons were charged. Commander Harris sat in the intelligence center, surrounded by holographic displays. Data streamed across the screens. Sensor readings, communication intercepts, patrol patterns. He had been studying the Dravix pirates for 3 days straight. Now finally he was starting to understand them. The pirates were predictable. They attacked every 2 weeks, always during daylight hours on Valar Prime. They came in fast, took what they wanted, and disappeared before anyone could respond. They used the asteroid field as cover, hiding in the maze of rocks and debris. The Council had searched for their base dozens of times and found nothing, but the Council had been looking with their eyes. Harris was looking with mathematics. Every ship left traces, heat signatures, engine emissions, gravitational disturbances. The asteroid field might hide visual sensors, but it could not hide physics. Harris had deployed stealth drones throughout the sector. They watched everything. They recorded everything, and patterns were emerging. He called Lieutenant Chen to his office. The young pilot arrived within minutes, still wearing her flight suit. Harris showed her the data. There was a cluster of asteroids about 6 million kilometers from Valar Prime. Ships entered that cluster, but never came out the other side. Something was hidden there. Chen studied the coordinates. The asteroid field was dense. Flying through it would be dangerous even for human pilots. But she had flown through worse. She volunteered to do a reconnaissance run. Harris agreed but warned her to be careful. If the pirates detected her, the whole operation would be compromised. 2 hours later, Chen sat in the cockpit of her stealth fighter. The ship was small and fast, coated with materials that absorbed sensor beams. It was practically invisible when running silent. She had named it Shadow Dancer. It had carried her through 100 training missions. Today would be its first real combat operation. She launched from the carrier bay and accelerated toward the asteroid field. The massive rocks loomed ahead, tumbling through space in chaotic patterns. Chen took a deep breath and plunged into the maze. Her hands moved across the controls with practiced ease. She twisted and rolled, slipping between asteroids with meters to spare. Her heart raced, but her hands stayed steady. This was what she loved. The danger, the precision, the pure skill required to fly where others could not. Back on Earth, she had flown through canyons at supersonic speeds. She had threaded the needle between skyscrapers during urban combat training. Asteroids were just rocks. They did not shoot back. She followed Harris's coordinates deeper into the field. The asteroids grew larger and more numerous. Any normal pilot would have turned back. Chen pushed forward. Then she saw it. One asteroid was different from the others. It was perfectly spherical, too perfect to be natural. And there were openings in its surface. Docking bays. She had found the pirate base. Chen activated her scanner and recorded everything. The base's defenses. The number of ships docked. The energy signatures. She stayed at maximum stealth, her fighter drifting like just another piece of debris. The pirates had no idea she was there. After 10 minutes of scanning, she had everything Harris needed. She turned her ship and began the careful journey back through the asteroid field. When she landed back on the carrier, Harris was waiting. He downloaded her scanner data and smiled. They had the pirates. Admiral Bennett would be pleased. Meanwhile, in the hollowed-out asteroid, Warlord Kragoth was having a meeting with his captains. The massive reptilian sat on a throne made from stolen Valari artwork. His scales were dark green, scarred from decades of piracy. His eyes were yellow and cold. He had ruled this confederation for 20 years, and he intended to rule for 20 more. The captains were arguing about the human fleet. Some wanted to leave the system immediately. Humans were dangerous, they said. Everyone had heard the stories. The Deathworlders were strong and violent. Their ships were powerful. It was better to find easier prey. Kragoth slammed his fist on the armrest. The sound echoed through the chamber. He called them cowards. Humans were just another species. Yes, they had impressive ships. Yes, they looked dangerous. But they were new to the galaxy. They did not understand how things worked. They would follow council rules like everyone else. The Draviks had operated in this sector for years without consequences. They knew galactic law. The council could not authorize military action without months of debate. By the time the bureaucrats finished arguing, the pirates would be long gone. The humans might look scary, but they were bound by the same laws as everyone else. Kragoth made his decision. They would conduct one more raid on Valar Prime, a big one. They would take everything of value and humiliate the humans in the process. Then they would disappear for a few months while the council filed complaints. When things calmed down, they would return to business as usual. The captains agreed reluctantly. They trusted their warlord. He had never led them wrong before. They began preparing their ships for the raid. 20 vessels, more than enough to overwhelm the defenseless Valari, and if the humans tried to interfere, they would learn that pirates did not play by council rules. Admiral Bennett stood on the bridge of his flagship when Harris brought him Chen's data. He studied the holographic display of the pirate base. It was well hidden and well defended. Turrets covered every approach. Shields protected the docking bays. Taking it by direct assault would cost lives. But Bennett had not survived 30 years in the military by fighting fair. He asked Harris for options. The commander had several. They could bombard the base from long range, but the asteroids would provide cover. They could send in Marines, but the confined spaces would favor defenders. They could try to negotiate, but pirates rarely surrendered without a fight. Bennett made his decision. They would wait. The pirates would come to them. According to the pattern Harris had identified, the next raid was due in 2 days. The Draviks would attack Valar Prime, expecting an easy target. Instead, they would fly into an ambush. The human fleet would destroy them in the open, then move on the base before the remaining pirates could react. Captain Martinez liked the plan. Her ship would lead the ambush. The Warhammer had enough firepower to take on the entire pirate fleet alone. With the rest of the battle group in support, it would be a massacre. She ordered her crew to battle stations and waited. 2 days later, exactly on schedule, sensors detected ships approaching Valar Prime. 20 pirate vessels dropped out of hyperspace and began their attack run. They descended toward the planet's atmosphere, targeting the largest Valari city. Kragoth led the formation in his flagship, confident and arrogant. On the surface, alarms blared across the city. Valari civilians ran for shelter, terrified. They had experienced these raids before. They knew what was coming, but this time something was different. This time they were not alone. The human fleet had positioned itself behind Valar Prime's moon, hidden from sensors. The moment the pirates entered the atmosphere, Bennett gave the order. 6 destroyers broke orbit and dove toward the planet. They accelerated to insane speeds, their hulls glowing red from atmospheric friction. They looked like falling stars, beautiful and terrible. The pirates detected the incoming ships and panicked. 20 vessels suddenly seemed like too few. They broke formation, trying to scatter and escape. But it was too late. The human destroyers opened fire while still falling through the atmosphere. Railgun rounds streaked through the sky like lightning. Missiles launched in swarms, their trails crisscrossing the air. The first pirate ship exploded in a ball of fire. Then the second. Then the third. The Draviks tried to return fire, but their weapons were designed for raiding, not combat. Human shields absorbed their shots easily. More pirate ships died. The sky became a graveyard. Then the fighters arrived. Chen led her squadron down from the Warhammer, cutting through the atmosphere like knives. Her Reaper squadron was the best in the fleet, and she intended to prove it. She locked onto a pirate frigate and fired. Her missiles struck the ship's engines, crippling it. She pulled up sharply, rolling to avoid debris, and selected her next target. The other pilots followed her lead. They moved with impossible speed and precision. Pirate ships tried to track them but could not keep up. Human pilots pulled maneuvers that generated forces strong enough to kill most species. They flew through crossfire without hesitation. They were predators and the pirates were prey. On the ground, the Valari watched in shock. They had never seen violence like this. Ships exploded in the sky like fireworks. Burning debris rained down into the ocean. The sound of weapons fire echoed across the city. It was terrifying. It was horrible. It was beautiful. Zephyra stood on the roof of the council building watching the battle. Dr. Cross stood beside her, trying to explain what was happening. He told her this was actually restraint by human standards. Admiral Bennett could have destroyed the entire pirate fleet in seconds with a single orbital strike. Instead, he was being careful, trying to minimize collateral damage, trying to capture pirates alive for questioning. Zephyra could not comprehend this. If this was restraint, what did human warfare actually look like? She decided she did not want to know. The battle lasted 12 minutes. When it ended, 19 pirate ships were destroyed or disabled. Only Kragoth's flagship managed to escape. The human fleet moved through the asteroid field like a pack of wolves stalking prey. Captain Martinez stood on the bridge of the Warhammer, watching the tactical display. Asteroids tumbled past the view screen, some as small as cars, others as large as mountains. Any one of them could destroy a ship if it hit at the wrong angle. But the Warhammer's computers tracked thousands of trajectories simultaneously, plotting safe passage through the chaos. Commander Harris worked at his station, coordinating the fleet's approach. The battlecruisers moved in a staggered formation, each ship covering the others. The destroyers spread out in a protective screen. Above them, fighters flew in loose formations, ready to engage any enemy that appeared. It was textbook military precision, executed by crews who had trained together for years. Admiral Bennett studied the sensor readings of the pirate base. It sat in the heart of the asteroid cluster, a hollowed-out rock 3 kilometers across. Defensive turrets covered every approach. Energy shields shimmered around the docking bays. The pirates had built a fortress confident in its impregnability. They were about to learn that humans specialized in doing the impossible. Harris had developed a plan that was brilliant in its simplicity. The asteroids that protected the pirate base could also destroy it. All they needed to do was redirect the trajectories of a few large rocks. The pirates would be fighting natural disasters while the human fleet advanced under cover of the chaos. It was unconventional, unexpected, and exactly the kind of asymmetric warfare that humans excelled at. Bennett gave the order. 3 destroyers broke formation and positioned themselves near massive asteroids. Their railguns charged, building up enormous amounts of energy. Then they fired. The magnetic accelerators launched projectiles at incredible velocities, striking the asteroids at carefully calculated points. The impacts were precise, transferring just enough momentum to alter the rock's orbits. At first, nothing seemed to happen. The asteroids continued their tumbling dance through space. But Harris watched his calculations with satisfaction. In 5 minutes, those rocks would be on collision courses with the pirate base. In 10 minutes, the base's outer defenses would be under bombardment from objects weighing millions of tons. No shield could stop that kind of kinetic energy. Inside the base, alarms suddenly blared. Sensor operators detected the incoming asteroids and panicked. They tried to target the rocks with their defensive turrets, but the fire control systems were not designed to track natural objects. The weapons locked onto the wrong targets, fired at empty space, wasted ammunition on rocks that were no threat at all. Kragoth rushed to the command center, demanding to know what was happening. His officers showed him the sensor displays. Multiple asteroids were converging on the base from different directions. It was impossible. Asteroids did not move like that, unless someone was making them move. The warlord realized the truth a moment before the first impact. The humans were not attacking the base. They were using the asteroid field itself as a weapon. It was a tactic he had never imagined, never prepared for, never believed possible. The Deathworlders were turning the pirates' own fortress against them. The first asteroid struck the base's outer defense grid. The impact was catastrophic. Turrets shattered like glass. Power conduits exploded. A section of the base's hull cracked open, venting atmosphere into space. Emergency shields activated, but they were designed to stop weapons, not mountains of rock traveling at orbital velocities. Then the second asteroid hit. And the third. The base shook with each impact. Lights flickered. Gravity generators failed in some sections. Pirates scrambled to their ships, desperate to escape. But the docking bays were damaged, their shields compromised. Ships trying to launch collided with debris. Chaos spread through the fortress. Through the maelstrom of tumbling rocks and debris, the human fleet advanced. The battlecruisers opened fire with their main cannons, targeting the base's remaining defenses. Railgun rounds punched through weakened shields and tore into the asteroid's surface. Missile salvos followed, their warheads detonating against hull plating and excavating huge craters. Captain Martinez coordinated the assault with ruthless efficiency. She had studied the base's layout from Chen's reconnaissance data. She knew where the command center was located, where the power generators sat, where the ammunition stores were kept. She targeted them systematically, dismantling the base piece by piece. The Warhammer's main cannons fired in sequence, each shot perfectly aimed. The magnetic accelerators launched projectiles at a fraction of light speed. When the rounds hit, they released kinetic energy equivalent to small nuclear weapons. Armor melted. Structure collapsed. The pirate base was being torn apart from the outside while asteroids battered it from within. Lieutenant Chen led her squadron through the chaos, hunting pirate fighters. The Dravix pilots tried to organize a defense, but they were hopelessly outmatched. Chen's fighters moved through the asteroid field like fish through water, weaving between rocks at speeds that seemed suicidal. Her pilots pulled maneuvers that generated forces that would kill most species, their bodies strengthened by evolution on a high-gravity world. A pirate fighter tried to ambush Chen from behind an asteroid. She detected it before it could fire, rolling her ship 90 degrees and cutting thrust. The pirate shot past her, unable to match her sudden deceleration. Chen flipped her fighter end over end and fired. Her missiles struck the pirate's engines, turning the ship into an expanding cloud of debris. All around her, her squadron was doing the same. The Reaper pilots were the best humanity had produced. Trained from childhood in simulators and tested in live fire exercises, they flew with computer-assisted targeting linked directly to their neural interfaces. Their reaction times were measured in milliseconds. They moved like extensions of their ships, metal and flesh working as one. The pirate pilots fought bravely but uselessly. They were raiders, not soldiers. They had spent years bullying the defenseless and running from real fights. Now they faced an enemy that specialized in real fights, and they were dying by the dozens. Within minutes, the space around the base was clear of hostile fighters. Chen's squadron had not lost a single pilot. Admiral Bennett watched the battle unfold with grim satisfaction. The plan was working perfectly. The pirate base's defenses were crippled. Their fighters were destroyed. Their fleet was scattered. It was time for the final phase. He gave the order to the Marine commander. Send in the boarding teams. Dropships launched from the carriers, small and heavily armored. They accelerated toward the base, their pilots flying through fields of debris with fearless precision. Pirate turrets tried to target them, but most of the weapons were offline. The few shots that connected bounced off the dropship's armor, leaving nothing but scorch marks. The ships attached themselves to the base's hull like ticks on a dog. Cutting torches burned through the outer armor. Explosive charges blew holes in bulkheads. Then the Marines poured through the breaches, flowing into the base in disciplined teams. They wore powered armor that amplified their already formidable strength. They carried weapons designed to punch through starship hulls. The corridors of the base became a war zone. Pirates tried to mount a defense, firing from behind improvised barricades. But they were fighting humans who had evolved on a deathworld. Marines moved with terrifying speed despite their heavy armor. They coordinated their attacks with military precision. They used tactics developed over centuries of human warfare. A group of pirates tried to ambush a Marine squad in a narrow corridor. It was the kind of trap that would work against most species, relying on close quarters and overwhelming numbers. But humans had been fighting in close quarters since they lived in caves. The Marines adapted instantly, using grenades to clear the corridor and then advancing through the smoke before the pirates could recover. The Dravix were large and strong by galactic standards. They had claws and teeth designed for combat, but they had never fought anything like humans. The Deathworlders were stronger, faster, and more aggressive than anything the pirates had encountered. Even without their armor and weapons, the Marines would have been deadly. With them, they were unstoppable. Kragoth watched his fortress fall on the command center displays. His warriors were dying. His ships were destroyed. His reputation was in ruins. He had ruled this confederation for 20 years through fear and violence. Now he was learning what real violence looked like. The humans had brought war to his door, and he had no defense against it. He gathered his elite guard around him, the best fighters he had. They would make their last stand in the command center, At least he would die like a warrior, fighting to the end. But when the Marines breached the command center doors, Kragoth's courage failed him. These were not ordinary soldiers. They were killers from a world that had tried to kill them since birth. They moved with the confidence of apex predators. Their eyes showed no fear, only determination. Captain Martinez led the breach team personally. She had requested the honor of taking down the warlord. Admiral Bennett had granted it, knowing her history with pirates. She entered the command center with her rifle raised, scanning for targets. The elite guard tried to fight, but it was over in seconds. Martinez's team moved with choreographed. The news of humanity's victory spread across the galaxy at the speed of light. Within days, every civilized world knew what had happened at Valar Prime. The humans had destroyed a pirate confederation that had operated for 2 decades. They had done it in less than a week. They had freed hundreds of hostages and captured one of the most notorious warlords in the sector. It was unprecedented. It was shocking. And it changed everything. The Galactic Council convened an emergency session on their orbital station above the capital world. Representatives from 200 species gathered in the Great Chamber, their voices filling the air with dozens of languages. The translation systems worked overtime, converting the chaos into something resembling debate. But beneath the diplomatic language, the message was clear. Everyone was arguing about humanity. Ambassador Thexan of the Kryn Empire led the prosecution. He stood at the central podium, his large frame imposing, his voice carrying authority. He laid out the charges against humanity with meticulous detail. Unauthorized military action, excessive use of force, failure to seek council approval, violation of sovereign space. The list went on for 20 minutes. Thexan painted a picture of humanity as dangerous warmongers. He reminded the Council of Earth's violent history. He cited statistics about human military spending. He showed recordings of the battle focusing on the destruction of pirate ships. He argued that allowing such aggression to go unpunished would encourage other species to abandon diplomatic solutions. The galaxy would descend into chaos. Many representatives agreed with him. The Council had maintained peace for centuries through careful diplomacy and strict adherence to law. Humanity threatened that peace. They were too violent, too quick to use force, too unpredictable. Better to censure them now before they caused real damage. Some even suggested expelling Earth from the galactic community entirely, but others disagreed. A representative from a small trading consortium stood and asked a simple question. Where was the Council when his people called for help 3 years ago? Pirates had attacked their merchant ships for months. The Council had sent investigators. They had filed reports. They had formed committees. And the pirates had continued raiding. Dozens died. Hundreds were enslaved. The Council did nothing. Other voices joined in. Species that had suffered under criminal violence for years without relief. Worlds that had sent desperate pleas for help only to be buried in bureaucratic procedure. Victims who had watched their loved ones stolen while the Council debated proper response protocols. For them, humanity's actions were not aggression, they were salvation. Then Coordinator Zephyra of Valar Prime addressed the Council. She spoke quietly, her graceful form seeming fragile among the larger species. She explained what her people had endured. The months of terror, the children stolen, the Council's failure to protect them. She admitted that human methods frightened her. The violence was beyond anything her pacifist culture could comprehend. But, she continued, humans had saved her people when no one else would. They had freed hostages the Council had given up for lost. They had eliminated a threat the Council could not stop. Yes, they used violence. Yes, they ignored procedures. But they got results. And sometimes results mattered more than rules. Her speech created a wave of murmurs through the chamber. A pacifist species defending warriors? It seemed impossible. But Zephyra was not finished. She revealed the data that Admiral Bennett had recovered from the pirate base. Evidence of corruption. Council officials with financial ties to criminal organizations. Governments that profited from piracy while publicly condemning it. The evidence was damning. The chamber erupted into chaos. Representatives shouted accusations at each other. Some demanded investigations. Others denied the evidence. Ambassador Thexan tried to restore order, but his own government was implicated in the data. His credibility was shattered. The carefully maintained facade of Council unity crumbled in minutes. Dr. Cross watched from the observer section, where humanity had been allowed to send a representative. He had not expected Zephyra to defend them so strongly, but he understood why she had. She was not defending human violence. She was attacking the system that had forced her to choose violence over inaction. The Council had failed, and humanity had exposed that failure. The session ended without resolution. The Council was divided. Some species openly supported humanity. Others remained hostile. Most were confused, uncertain what to think. The galaxy's power structure, stable for centuries, was suddenly in flux, and Earth sat at the center of that flux whether they wanted to or not. On the Warhammer, Admiral Bennett received reports from across the galaxy. Delegations requesting human assistance, criminal organizations issuing threats, governments demanding explanations. It was overwhelming. He had come to save one world from pirates. Now half the galaxy wanted something from him. A group of species approached with a formal proposal. They wanted Earth to lead a coalition to address criminal enterprises that the Council could not handle. Pirates, slavers, warlords. The galaxy was full of predators who operated with impunity. Humanity's military might could change that. They could make the galaxy safer for everyone. Bennett was tempted. The proposal made sense, but he knew the danger. Earth's fleet was powerful, but it was not infinite. They could not police the entire galaxy. Spreading too thin would leave Earth vulnerable, and making enemies of powerful species could have consequences his grandchildren would still be dealing with. He called a meeting with his senior staff. Captain Martinez argued for expansion. They had proven human methods worked. They had the opportunity to make real change. Turning down the coalition would waste that opportunity. Commander Harris urged caution. Every action created reactions. The more humanity intervened, the more enemies they would make. Eventually, they would face opposition they could not overcome. Dr. Cross advocated for a middle path. Selective intervention, choosing battles carefully, building alliances through action rather than promises. Humanity did not need to save the entire galaxy. Just parts of it. Enough to prove their worth. Enough to show that a better way was possible. Lieutenant Chen wanted to keep fighting. She had tasted victory and wanted more. But she was young and idealistic. She believed humans could fix everything if they just tried hard enough. The older officers knew better. Some problems had no solution. Some evils could not be eliminated. The best they could hope for was to make things slightly better. Bennett listened to them all. Then he sent a message to Earth Command requesting guidance. The response came back within hours. The decision was his. Earth trusted his judgment. Whatever path he chose, the homeworld would support it. It was both empowering and terrifying. The future of humanity's role in the galaxy rested on his shoulders. Before he could make his decision, a new crisis emerged. The Kryn Empire announced it was sending a fleet to the Volari system. Their official statement called it a peacekeeping mission. They would escort human forces out of what the Kryn considered their sphere of influence. They would restore proper council authority. They would ensure that rogue species did not destabilize galactic order. Commander Harris pulled up intelligence reports on the Kryn military. What he found was concerning. The Kryn were one of the galaxy's major powers. Their fleet numbered in the thousands. Their technology was centuries more advanced than humanity's. They had never lost a war, and they were coming to Velar Prime with over 100 warships. The Kryn fleet arrived 3 days later. They took up position at the edge of the Volari system, forming a blockade. The message was clear. Leave peacefully or be removed by force. Admiral Bennett's expeditionary group was outnumbered 10-1. A direct battle would be suicide. Any sane commander would retreat. Bennett was not sure he was sane anymore. He had come to protect the Volari. He had promised they would be safe. Leaving now would break that promise. It would show the galaxy that humans could be bullied, that their word meant nothing. That force of numbers trumped justice. Everything they had accomplished would be undone. He opened a communication channel to the Kryn fleet commander. Fleet Marshal Daxrin appeared on the screen, a large reptilian creature with gold-scaled skin and calculating eyes. He had commanded the Kryn military for 20 years. He had crushed rebellions and conquered worlds. He expected humans to understand they were outmatched. The conversation was professional but tense. Daxrin explained that human actions had violated council law. The Kryn Empire, as a senior council member, had authority to enforce those laws. Bennett should withdraw his fleet immediately. Safe passage would be guaranteed. No hostile action would be taken. But the humans had to leave. Bennett's response was calm. He thanked Daxran for the offer. Then he declined. Earth would not abandon those it had sworn to protect. The Valari had asked for help. Humanity had provided it. The mission was complete, but the commitment remained. If the Kryn wanted humans gone, they would have to remove them by force. Daxran was surprised. He pointed out the obvious. His fleet had superior numbers and technology. Human ships, while impressive, were no match for Kryn dreadnoughts. A battle would result in human casualties without achieving anything. Why die for a planet that was not even human? The summit took place on a neutral station orbiting a dead world in unclaimed space. It was a compromise location, chosen specifically because no species could claim authority there. The station was ancient, built by a civilization that had died out millennia ago. Its halls echoed with ghosts of the past. Now it would host negotiations that would shape the future. Admiral Bennett arrived with a small delegation. Dr. Cross handled diplomatic discussions. Commander Harris provided tactical analysis. Captain Martinez represented the military perspective. They were outnumbered by representatives from dozens of species. The council chamber was filled with delegates, observers, and media from across the galaxy. Everyone wanted to see how this would end. Fleet Marshal Daxran of the Kryn Empire sat across the chamber with his own delegation. His expression was unreadable. The confrontation at Valar Prime had embarrassed his government. They had issued an ultimatum and then backed down. The Kryn leadership wanted resolution, but they also wanted to save face. That made them unpredictable. The council speaker called the session to order. She was an elderly member of the Sarian species, known for their diplomatic skills. She had mediated conflicts for 50 years, but even she seemed uncertain how to proceed. The situation was unprecedented. A new species had challenged the fundamental way the council operated. There was no protocol for this. The debate began with formal accusations. The Kryn presented their case against humanity. Unauthorized military action, excessive casualties, disregard for proper procedure. They called for sanctions, restrictions on human military operations, perhaps even expulsion from the council if Earth did not accept limits on their behavior. Dr. Cross stood to respond. He did not deny the accusations. Yes, humans had acted without approval. Yes, they had used significant force. But he asked the council to consider why. The Valari had called for help. The council had failed to respond effectively. Innocents suffered while bureaucrats debated. Someone had to act. He presented the evidence recovered from the pirate base, financial records showing corrupt officials profiting from criminal enterprises, communication logs proving that some governments knew about pirate operations and did nothing, trade agreements that funneled stolen goods through legitimate channels. The council's failure was not just incompetence. In some cases it was deliberate. The revelation caused chaos. Representatives shouted denials. Others demanded investigations. The Kryn delegation tried to dismiss the evidence as fabricated, but too many species recognized their own officials in the data. The corruption was real. It was extensive, and humanity had exposed it. Coordinator Zephyra spoke next. She thanked the council for allowing her to address them. Then she asked a simple question. What should she have done? Her people were suffering. The council sent investigators and complaints. The pirates sent raiders and kidnappers. Should she have waited months for proper procedures while her children were stolen? Should she have accepted diplomatic failure as inevitable? Or should she have called someone who would actually help? Someone who valued action over process? Someone who understood that sometimes the innocent need warriors, not negotiators? She had chosen humanity because they were the only ones who answered with more than words. And her people were alive because of it. Her words struck at the heart of the matter. The council had maintained peace through careful diplomacy. But they had also allowed injustice to flourish. They had prioritized order over justice, stability over action, and species like the Valari had paid the price. Humanity had revealed that truth, and the council could not ignore it anymore. A representative from a small frontier world stood and shared her own story. Pirates had raided her planet 5 years ago. She had called the council. They sent peacekeepers who arrived 3 months later. By then, the pirates were gone with everything of value. The council filed reports. They opened investigations. They accomplished nothing. Her world was still recovering from losses that could have been prevented. More representatives shared similar stories. species that had suffered while the Council moved at its own pace. Victims who had lost hope of ever receiving real help. A pattern emerged. The Council worked well for powerful species who could defend themselves. For everyone else, it was a system that valued procedure over protection. Fleet Marshal Daxren finally spoke. His voice was measured, but tension showed in his posture. He acknowledged that the Council had problems. But abandoning law and order was not the solution. If every species acted unilaterally, chaos would result. Humanity's success at Valar Prime could inspire others to use force first and ask questions later. The galaxy would descend into warfare. Admiral Bennett stood to respond. He agreed that uncontrolled violence was dangerous. But so was controlled inaction. The Council's careful approach had created a power vacuum that criminals exploited. Predators operated freely because they knew the Council was too slow to stop them. Fear of warfare had led to acceptance of injustice. That was not peace. That was surrender. He proposed a solution: create a rapid response force within the Council structure, a military coalition authorized to act quickly in emergencies. It would operate under oversight but with autonomy in tactical decisions. Species could volunteer ships and personnel. The force would handle situations where traditional diplomacy was insufficient, like piracy, like slavery, like any crisis where innocents suffered while bureaucrats debated. The proposal sparked intense discussion. Some species supported it immediately. Others worried about abuse of power. The Kryn delegation was skeptical, but did not reject it outright. After hours of debate, a compromise emerged. The Council would create the Rapid Response Coalition. It would be voluntary. It would have clear rules of engagement, and it would be led jointly by multiple species to prevent any single power from dominating. Humanity would provide significant military assets, but not exclusive control. The Kryn Empire would contribute ships and oversight to ensure proper procedure. Smaller species would have representation in command decisions. It was not perfect. No compromise ever was. But it was a start. A way to balance action with accountability, justice with order. The vote was close, but the proposal passed. The Rapid Response Coalition was officially created. Several species immediately volunteered to participate. Others reserved judgment but did not oppose it. The galaxy was changing, adapting to new realities. Humanity had forced that change, and the Council had accepted it rather than fight. Admiral Bennett accepted the compromise. It was not everything he wanted. The oversight would slow responses. The shared command would create complications. But it was better than the old system, and it proved that the galaxy could change when forced to confront its failures. After the vote, Daxren approached Bennett privately. The Kryn Marshal admitted that he had underestimated humanity. He had seen their military power but dismissed their determination. He understood now that humans were not reckless. They were committed, willing to fight for principles even when outnumbered. That was rare in the galaxy. Dangerous, but rare. Bennett thanked him for the acknowledgement. He explained that humans came from a world that had tried to kill them. They had survived by being stubborn, by refusing to give up even when logic said they should. That trait made them effective warriors. But it also made them reliable allies. When humans made promises, they kept them, even if it cost them everything. The two commanders parted with mutual respect. They would likely clash again in the future. Their species had different values and different approaches, but they had found common ground. Both wanted a safer galaxy. They just had different ideas about how to achieve it. That was acceptable. That was workable. The human fleet prepared to leave Valar Prime. The mission was complete. The pirates were defeated. The hostages were free. The galaxy was changing because of their actions. Captain Martinez stood on the Warhammer's bridge one last time before departure, looking at the planet below. It was beautiful, peaceful, safe. That was worth fighting for. Lieutenant Chen flew a final patrol over the Valari capital. The city had returned to normal. Citizens moved through the streets without fear. Children played in parks. Artists worked in their studios. The Valari were living their lives again, free from terror. Chen felt pride in that. Her squadron had helped make it possible. They had protected the innocent. That was the job. On the surface, Coordinator Zephyra stood at her window watching the human ships prepare for departure. She felt conflicted. Part of her was relieved they were leaving. Their capacity for violence still frightened her. But another part was sad. They had been guardians, protectors, and now her people would have to hope the new coalition worked as promised. She had arranged a ceremony to honor the humans. The entire city gathered to say farewell. Admiral Bennett attended with his senior officers. The Valari presented them with crystals carved into the shape of stars, traditional symbols of hope. Sephara spoke to the assembled crowd, praising humanity's courage and thanking them for saving her people. Bennett accepted the gift with genuine humility. He told the Valari that humanity had simply done what needed to be done. They had not come for glory or recognition. They had come because innocence needed help. That was enough reason. That would always be enough reason.